Dadhood. Modern Dadhood Podcast.
Can you believe it? It's another episode.
It is. It's another episode. I can believe it. And I'm excited.
In quarantine.
Episode number 3 in quarantine? How many have we had in quarantine?
Yeah, I think 3. We've been recording some interviews with folks and mix matching a little bit. But man, what a strange time to be alive.
Where are we? Can you describe to the folks at home where I am?
Well, I'm looking at you on Zoom and I see beautiful periwinkle colored walls. I see a shelf over your head that looks slightly crooked, but I have a feeling it's just the angle of your laptop. And I happen to know that you're sitting on a beautiful piece of porcelain.
I am on a toilet. I am. It's closed.
Is it?
Mm-hmm. Which it just becomes a chair when it's closed.
You know what, man? I'm not here to judge. If it feels good and sounds good, do it.
This is modern dadhood.
Sure is.
Right?
It sure is.
I've almost forgotten.
You wouldn't forget.
No, I can't forget the name.
It's an ongoing conversation about the joys, challenges, and general insanity of being a dad in this moment. And a moment it is.
I would say exceptionally insane these days.
My name's Adam Flaherty. I'm a dad of 2 daughters, 6 and 3.
And my name is Marc, and I am a dad of twin boy toddlers.
Before we get in too deep here, Marc, I want to give a shout out to Pete Morse at Red Vault Audio. Pete has been mixing our podcast as of late, and he's got a fantastic studio in Portland, Maine, where he tracks bands and voiceovers, but he also does really great post-production work, mixing and mastering. And I've had a lot of people say to me, Adam, I really love Modern Dadhood. It sounds so professional. A lot of that has to do with the recommendations and the mixing of Pete Morse at Red Vault Audio. And anything you've heard that doesn't sound polished and professional, pretty much guaranteed Pete wasn't involved in those segments. So thank you to Pete Morse at Red Vault Audio. If you need any mixing, mastering, etc., check out redvaultaudio.com and email Pete and mention Modern Dadhood so, you know, he knows that we sent you.
Do you think Pete Morse knows Morse code?
Rumor has it, it was his great-grandfather, Alastair Morse, who invented Morse code.
Well, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Pete in my own way then, if you'll just indulge me for a second.
Of course. Have at it.
Pete, this is a message just for you. ... dash dot dash dash dot dash 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 dot dash.
The only thing I know for certain is that it wasn't SOS. Or was
it? It wasn't. Nope, it wasn't. You're right. No, you're right. You know Morse code well enough to know that was not SOS.
Thank God.
Pete will know.
So it seems we have a new wave of listeners and subscribers, and I'd like to give a welcome to you, moms and dads. It's nice to have you on board. I hope you're really enjoying what you're hearing on Modern Dadhood. Marc, do you want to give a quick refresher on what Modern Dadhood is all about?
I guess. Well, they know who we are now, so that's good. I think one thing that's important to note to any new listeners is that me and Adam, we are not experts in this stuff. I mean, I don't want to drag you down. I don't want to crush any hopes you might have had in finally finding a couple of brilliant specialists to get you through those hard times. We're not experts. We're just couple of regular dads trying to figure this out as we go. But we do talk to a lot of people. We talk to dads of young kids, dads of older kids, dads of much older kids. In fact, we've had 1 or 2 grandfathers on the show, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Yeah. So you'll hear from a lot of different perspectives. And so you're guaranteed to learn something. You just might not learn something from me.
If you want to learn a little bit more in-depth about Modern Dadhood, jump back to episode 1 called The Setup, where we really kind of lay out our philosophy for the show and what inspired it. We also have some really fun FAQ videos on our website and social media pages on Facebook and Instagram, where we answer some of those frequently asked questions in a rather silly manner.
I would say silly. You also get to see our gorgeous faces.
the last thing I'll say about it, and then I promise to shut up, is that if you sign up for our email list at moderndadhood.com, that's a great way to stay in the loop on when new episodes come out. And also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We're very easy to find, and we love connecting and engaging with the listeners and talking about being dads, right?
All dads, all the dad time. Adam. As you know, there are a ton of great resources out there, right? Pages to follow on Facebook, websites, YouTube channels, all sorts of stuff to get some really good, like, parenting, fatherhood type content, right?
Yes, go on.
One of my favorites, I think you know about this one, is called The Dad.
You know, I am aware of The Dad.
You know The Dad?
And I have a hunch that a lot of our listeners are probably aware of The Dad too.
Probably. They have like I don't remember, I think like a bajillion maybe followers on Facebook.
Yeah, somewhere right up close to a bajillion.
Something like a bajillion. They got a lot of followers because they have some super fun content, right? At times it's kind of sentimental. They've got jokes up there. They've got great stories that they convey, stories that they find out there on the internet and that they relay through their Facebook page or their Instagram account.
One of the things that I think that The Dad does so exceptionally well is takes these everyday things that we all experience as parents and shines a light on how ridiculous they can be. And it's never done sarcastically. It's always sincere and embracing the craziness.
Yeah.
So one of the team members at The Dad is a comedian named Matt Fisher. He's a writer. He is an actor. He appears in tons of their video content that just gets shared like crazy. Matt also semi-regularly appears on the Strahan and Sarah show, hosted by Michael Strahan.
What you mean, Michael Strahan?
So the dude's kind of a big deal, and I'm very pleased to welcome him onto Modern Dadhood. Hi, Matt.
Hi, how's it going? Nice to meet you.
Awesome to meet you, Matt.
Matt, this is week 5 or 6 of quarantining due to this weird pandemic. You've got 2 sons. How are you holding up?
We're maintaining, I'd say. Like, there's so many caveats that you give about your situation whenever you describe this to people. Like, we're safe and sound. My wife and I are still working, which is, let's treat that as purely a blessing for the purposes of this description. Like, we can stay in our house. The grocery stores are up and all that stuff. But it is difficult. Like, it is just about all we can manage. We're in Brooklyn, so we are like in the soup in some senses, although like we're, pretty much safe at this point. But like outside is a challenge, and the density around here makes it tough to run the kids around, especially with no kind of end in sight or no real way to describe to the boys like what comes next. I'll never appreciate a playground as much as the next time I go and let him go on the swing. So much to take for granted.
Yeah, I feel kind of lucky in a sense because my kids are so young. I have twins and they're just a little over 2 years old. So it's like those conversations aren't really necessary. They're not asking questions like that. I mean, periodically they kind of remember that they're not in daycare anymore and they think about their teachers. And so they'll say a teacher's name and then they'll kind of get this sad look. And all we kind of have to do is sort of say like, well, we're not going to see Mrs. Grace today. And then you can just be like, look, here's a train, and then get them off the topic. But yeah, with all of this heavy topics and all these heavy topics and all this kind of stuff going around, Adam and I were talking, you're a comedian. We started wondering, and it's like the question came up, are things still even funny?
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, completely. Like, or is that like is that the proper position for me to take vis-a-vis the situation? Is that the tool, is that the proper tool at hand? And on the one hand, you think of like satire and you think of like, obviously somebody needs to kind of be, moral in an apolitical way or, speak to right and wrong, speak to people's emotional experience. But on a minute to minute basis, like empathy is a new thing and respect is a new thing. And, the role of sarcasm in this situation is a lot more tenuous than it was when we were fighting about other stuff.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. It's funny. Our conversation didn't even go there the other night, and you're absolutely right. Comedies can be like sarcasm can be a tool that people use to sort of get through something or process something, right? But you're seeing so much more of the other stuff too. But you're right. You've got John Krasinski out there doing the Some Good News.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. It's such an awesome counterbalance. It's still funny.
Oh, for sure. Like it's something that people really need right now. They need to hear like, oh, these are the social ties that hold us together. And, but I think about that in terms of my kids, like they hear about the germs and they hear us tell them to wash their hands and they see what we do when we mask up to go to the store or whatever. And that's all like a very negative context. So I've been trying to think of like, okay, well, what can we tell them that's good news? And especially with my older son, I pass along a lot of Governor Cuomo's updates, just like sort of factual, level-headed. Here's what we're doing. Here are the numbers. Here's how bad it is. Here's what we need. But that's kind of an unalloyed political respect that I don't want to like necessarily inculcate in my kids, and so talking about him, my older son was like, wait, is this one of the guys we like? And I'm like, well, yeah, he's like doing a good job, but like, let's keep some perspective on who we're allowed to idolize and who deserves a second look.
Without allowing this conversation to become too political, it's interesting to live in a time where our kids are asking, when they see a public figure, is this somebody that we like or we don't like? It's a very strange concept rather than this person is a leader and we respect them, whether or not we agree with everything that they're saying. So speaking to the question of, are things still funny? While it may be harder to write humorous content when there's so much negativity and so many scary things around us, I feel like that's something that the dad does really well. You're creating humor that there's no risk of offending anybody. It's only a welcomed distraction for people. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it certainly is escapist in that way. Although, just like everybody, like it's all COVID now, as soon as this all happened and our production team scattered to the winds, the big challenge was like, how are we going to produce content? Like, what's the content schedule going to look like? How do we meet all those obligations? And that first, like one of those first nights, I sent around an email and it was like literally a Jerry Maguire moment. I was like, I'm in this house with my kids and they're scared and I don't know what to do. And so although my obligation is here to like make comedy with you guys and make content and do all this stuff, like if I literally have to turn my back on my kids to get that done, in my heart of hearts, and this is as a dad, and like being a dad is obviously a huge part of like how I make content and what I make content about. And if that's my obligation, both here in the office and in my home, like my heart is with my kids, And immediately, what that led me to was this thing that I'm trying to do now, which is called At Home with Matt, where it's like a direct-to-camera series where, I just talk about what's happening in my home, try and collect as much input from commenters and viewers, like have it be sort of a clearinghouse for good ideas and anxieties and the things that are going on. So, your question sort of says like, to what extent is it escapist? You make comedy of it, but it's much more sort of like we were talking about before. It's much more a comedy of solidarity almost. There's no talking around it. And I think we realized that, if the content that we kept putting out didn't acknowledge what was going on, then that would feel very alienating and sort of false to people. So that's the challenge: is you can't talk around it. But how do you make comedy out of it?
So let's talk about Dadhood. I'm sure most, if not all, of our listeners are aware of the Dad. Tell us how you became involved as a writer and on-screen talent for the Dad.
Yeah, I've worked at the Dad. I started there about 2 Thanksgivings ago, last fall or previous to last fall. And I was hired on as a writer, but it was a very, very small team. One of the great things about the Dad is that the content comes from a real small team of creators. Nick Fabiano and Ben Stumpf and Joel Willis kind of made this thing, and nobody ever said like, this is what the voice is going to be, or this is what the kind of, mission statement is going to be, but it's become this great thing. And I feel like it's pretty well aligned with your mission too. We don't do a lot of sarcasm about your obligation to your kids. And it's not, like, oh, the old ball and chain. And I wish I was down at the bar.
Right.
And so that's, I think, great. That's, to me, is the very positive part of it, is like, how do we acknowledge all those temptations and all those kind of split loyalties, but at the same time, like, how does a person in this modern, divided world and the fragmented schedule, how are you there for your kids? What does that role look like?
It seems to come up a lot that there's been like a shift over the years where dads have just naturally become more involved, and it's not like we're looking to be celebrated for that or like recognized for going above and beyond, when in the past that's been more of the mom's role. But as you are sitting around with your team of content creators there and sort of talking about this philosophy, have you guys ever had an epiphany of what might have led to this kind of shifting of sands in terms of just the role of the father?
Well, I mean, my take on it is that it's just kind of the economic squeeze. Like I grew up in a family where my dad worked and my mom gave up her career. And when she had the kids, like she decided that her obligation was in the home 24/7. And I'm a great beneficiary of that. And, the challenge for my dad was just as, daunting. He ended up working 2 and 3 jobs and, really sacrificed that way. So if you have a thing where, people's time is more divided and it's less a thing of like, less a gender split of like who's going to work and who's not going to work. If everybody's going to try and juggle all this stuff at the same time, these are some of the questions I think you guys and we are trying to solve.
Yeah.
What does it look like? What does it look like when dad cooks? Because that's for better or worse, that's a problem that is of recent vintage a little bit. Mm. What's great about y'all, and I think about the dad, is that we don't pretend that that's some sort of insurmountable challenge to the male identity, that caring for kids and having that role is perfectly compatible with, modern masculinity for lack of a better term. And it's nice to be in the public eye saying like, we're doing our best. I'm not sweating. This is a challenge to my role as a red meat eater or whatever, and we're solving it as best we can day by day for our kids.
I was just thinking back to one of our like a previous guest of ours, who I love the way that he put it. He talked about how some of his friends, I think he was kind of talking about some of his like older family members and people who comment something like, "Oh, it's so great that you like to be with your kids and that you take the time and it seems like you really love your kids." And his response was like, "That's because that's what you're supposed to do." I just love the way he put it, because you could tell it wasn't a whole lot to it other than that's it. And I think, maybe it's subconscious or I don't know, but I think I too sort of just picked up on the cues of like the positive actions and responses that I witnessed from my parents. And just now I'm putting them forward now that I have kids.
Well, it's funny. I think that also hearing you describe it that way, my experience has been that now the identification flows in the other direction a little bit. Like the life I've chosen of like, doing comedy and trying to pursue all that stuff. And even just living in the city, it's something that my family finds very alienating, from day one. Even when I lived in Boston for a while. And, like my relatives would come to our apartment in Boston and be like, who someone else upstairs. That's like some other house, and we're like, yeah. And so like, I've made a whole series of decisions that make no sense to anyone in my family, particularly my parents. But once we had kids and they see me with my boys, they're like, oh, there is like a continuity here. There's, like, oh, we didn't just give birth to an alien, this, the family identity lives and the values have been passed on. Even if, my parents wouldn't live in Brooklyn for love or money.
Matt, why do you think that the role of dad is such a great opportunity for humor?
That's a good question. I think that, well, one is that it's not obviously it's not a universal situation, but it is a situation, parenthood and those kind of things are very widely shared. So these challenges and the things that we bring up are, familiar to a lot of people, men and women, the dad has, plenty of female followers too. So there's that. But I think that, it kind of ladders up to larger questions of like what it means to be a person, and especially now in these coronavirus times, the practical situations we find ourselves in really do ask you like, all right, you're a person, you like these shows, you want to spend your time doing X, Y, Z, but unfortunately or fortunately, you're a member of a society. So what's your obligation to the guy next door? What's your obligation to, the people on CNN? And in what arena is that more played out more personally than your obligation to your kids? Where, like as a first order moral issue, that like you drag these kids into this world, it's your job to answer for, their situation. And I think by and large, and as we're talking about more and more, people don't see that as like some sort of giant imposition. People do understand that on a personal level. But there's comedy, I think, in the fact that no matter how seriously you take that, in the middle of the night, when the bunny has gone missing from the bed and everybody's up running around the house screaming, your moral sense, your moral obligation, and no matter how seriously you take it, it only lives so far into the middle of the night.
Right.
So, in a way, the relationship that people have with their kids, you think about your morals, you think about your politics, you think about any of that stuff. You don't ever like live out all that stuff all at once. What it is it's a series of minute decisions about, well, are you going to make breakfast or not? Is this going to be a healthy one or not? Are you going to model good behavior in the next 10 minutes or not? And it's funny to me, the poetry of comedy and the poetry of, parenthood a little bit is to say that, like, no matter how lofty your goals are, you're going to meet them like one tiny incremental decision at a time, and connecting your larger goals to your ability to, give a good bath for the 750th time. That's a very funny human situation to be in, I think.
What you're saying is that it's a combination of subject matter that is relatable to both mothers and fathers, right? And the content is obviously very strong and shareable because it's so relatable. Are there any other secrets to cultivating such a strong and devoted following?
It's interesting you say that, because we don't really bear down on the strategy of it too much. And we don't, as we write sketches and we come up with ideas for stuff to do, it's very rarely that we're like, oh, does that kind of violate the ethos of this project or whatever? Although the dad does have a very kind of, I think, specific voice and a role we want to play. It's weird. It's sort of a Ouija board operation that comes out of our collective decisions without too much stressing out over it. I think, and also I think that that's part of the fact that it's comedy first. I think that if our voice was something else, I think you go a lot further wrong with that, because comedy to me is first and foremost, can you be careful enough in your communication to, how do you tease empathy and sympathy out of people? How do you, reveal to people that your perspective and my perspective, for all the differences in our circumstances, are not that different? That's comedy, and the ability to do that is comedy. At its heart, comedy is the ability to say, like, I'm very different than you, and I'm, and first and foremost because I'm willing to make an ass of myself on the internet. But I do that because the punchline is like a revelation of the idea of like, oh yeah, me too. Like that thing, you've brought up a stressful thing, and the punchline is, what, that the stress, I see it in myself, and we smash those two things together and it alleviates it a little bit. So the point being that I'm glad that we're in comedy a little bit, that it's a comedic approach first, because I think it solves kind of that problem that you're talking about. So the funnier you can be, the more people trust you a little bit, I think. So that's the saving grace of comedy, hopefully, is that it works best when you get a sense that the person on the other end of the line is a decent chap or lady.
Matt Fisher, thanks so much for the great conversation. I hope you and your family stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to more great content from the dad.
Thank you. Likewise. And likewise from the podcast. Wish you guys the best and all the luck in the world. And let's keep tabs on each other. Let's do this again soon.
Marc, you breathe, right?
I just did.
I heard it.
Yeah. No, I do it. I do it often.
Any guess as to how many breaths you take each day in a 24-hour period?
Are you about to blow my mind with like a number, some sort of statistic here?
I don't have a statistic, but while you're thinking about it, I'm going to Google it.
Okay, well then I'm going to guess. How many times do you breathe? How many times does the average human breathe? I'm just thinking here.
Quick math.
9?
Sorry, 9 breaths a day?
Hold on, I was never really good at math. I'm going to say you probably breathe like a quarter of a million times. 250,000 times in a 24-hour period? Yeah.
It's not that much.
It's not that much?
You breathe about 16 breaths per minute. That's 960 breaths an hour. That's 23,000 breaths a day.
Okay. I was on the right track, though, because I came to 20. You said 16 breaths a minute?
Yeah, roughly.
My math was going to bring us to 20 breaths a minute.
Okay.
Well,
And then somewhere along the line, you multiplied by 10.
Yeah. Well, I reached my limit with math, and that's what happens. Yep. Stay in school, kids.
The real reason I'm asking you about breathing is because I was surfing the Instagram the other day, and I follow Marc Duplass, actor, director.
Oh, heck yeah. I love Marc Duplass.
He posted something about a virtual breathwork session hosted by a practitioner named Carly Jo Carson. And Marc has worked with her before and said something to the effect of her breathwork has literally changed my life. And that intrigued me. Breathwork is something that I've looked into in the past, tried on a very small scale, but I think there's really something to it in terms of its power to help you work through things and to lower your stress. And so I said, what the heck? I signed up for this virtual session and I logged onto this Zoom meeting with people from all over the country and we went for it. Carly put on this music track that kind of waxed and waned, and it was a combination of sounds and music and speaking and singing, and we breathed heavily, like in and out fast for 70 minutes.
Wait a minute. I just want to reiterate. You did this for more than an hour.
Yeah, man. And it did not feel even close to that.
Holy cow, dude.
And I'll tell you, man, my head was tingling. My shoulders were tingling. My hands and feet were like ice cold. It was an experience that I've never felt before. This is not a paid endorsement or anything like that. I just wanted to share my experience because it was so cool and I'm looking forward to doing it again. If any dads or moms listening would like to check it out, just go to carlyjocarson.com where you can find more information. Highly recommended.
I think that finds us at the end of the episode.
Feels like we were just at the beginning of the episode and here we are at the end.
It does. That's what happens when you're with someone you love, Adam. That's what happens.
I adore you. Dads, you can find us at moderndadhood.com or on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen.
Oh, Adam, I was just thinking we should tell everyone about our super cool dad joke promo.
For sure. Do it.
Okay. Well, dads, we are putting together a super fun episode all about dad jokes. Got any good dad jokes right now? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay. Two cannibals are eating a clown.
Wait, what?
One of them looks at the other and says, "Does this taste funny to you?"
Adam, do you know what one ocean said to the other ocean?
Nothing. It just waves.
You son of a...
Yeah, it's because my kid tells me that one.
So we're putting together this episode about dad jokes, and what we want from you, dads out there, is to call the number 603-431-5465 and leave your best dad joke. And if it's really good, we're going to put it on the show, and a few lucky people are going to win a prize by Brewmate.
Call, leave a voicemail, and you might win a prize. We would invite you to drop us a line anytime at hey@moderndadhood.com. Want to say thanks for all of the ratings and reviews. Please keep them coming. They help us out so much. And we're also really grateful for any word of mouth. So please tell your dad friends and mom friends to find us on Apple Podcasts. Marc, we've got a goodbye to say this evening.
I don't want to say it. I'm not going to say it.
Come on, don't make me do it.
I'm just afraid to get sad in front of everyone.
Well, same. Do you want to flip a coin?
I'll say it. All kidding aside, we're going to say a fond farewell.
Farewell.
And a big final thank you.
Thank you.
To our intern, Nick Rose, who is ending his time as the Modern Dadhood intern.
Nick, you've been fantastic to us, and we owe you a very sincere thank you for all the hard work and great ideas you brought to the table. Thanks to Casper Baby Pants, as always, and Spencer Albee and Bubby Lewis for the wonderful music in our podcast. Thank you again to Pete Morse at Red Vault Audio for making us sound good. And thanks to you.
And thank you to you, the listeners.
Podcast. Just a modern.